What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York. We are back at the Gramercy Theater. We just wrapped up an awesome interview with Jungarot, and now we are here with Paul of Origin. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've been here. I think the last time was Summer Slaughter 2017 or something like that, right?
I'm in the city, I believe so. 2017 seems right, yes.
Yeah, and I missed your Vita show with Archspire, sadly. So.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So, yeah, it's been a couple of years since we've been in the city or the surrounding boroughs.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you back.
Thank you.
So, your newest record is Abiogenesis, which you had to correct me on. How did you pronounce it again?
Abiogenesis coming into existence.
Yes. Abiogenesis coming into existence, which was a unique record to hear some new songs as well as some old songs that never saw the light of day. You just want to give a rundown on how the making of this record was and everything been with it?
Basically, coming into existence has been out of print since the beginning of the 2000s, and so people have been doing stuff like overselling it on eBay, and it was going, for $120 to $180 online. And for the last 5 years, Agonia Records has been asking me about coming into existence and trying to press it, or they wanted to re-release it, and I was like, if it feels right and all the things line up accordingly, so be it. And then they started asking if there was anything else, and I was like, well, there's some stuff that I had sitting around that I recorded, I want to say in like 2013, I started doing drums and guitars for just these songs that I wrote prior to Origin, just to kind of dive into the recording realm and have something to tinker with. And so I did guitars and drums starting about 2013, and then like they kept inquiring like, hey, what's going on? We want to press this coming into existence. And I was like, well, I just don't know, and I had to go, I moved to the Bay Area, like 18, 19 years ago, something like that. And I was like, I had to go to my parents' house and find like old lyric sheets and stuff and kind of piece together. I knew how the rhythm, the vocal patterns were, but I didn't know all the words and everything. And still kind of don't actually, but it's like some beer got spilled on a bar napkin with some, old gore lyrics or something. So I was like trying to piece together everything, and then like it kept getting more and more serious, so I like put in some harmonies and did the vocals on the recording, and then had to go back and refigure out the guitar solo on one of the songs. So it was an interesting thing. I'm glad it's done so I can concentrate on the future, like I said. So very happy with how it came out, very happy with Agonia, and it seems like most of the fan base is ecstatic to have something kind of the prequel to per se. Yeah. Everyone loves a prequel anymore to Origin, and the Origin's of Origin, and gives a little history of it.
Yeah. What I was curious is when you looked at some of these older songs that never really saw the light of day before, you're kind of going back to the past. Did you think to yourself like, wow, we evolved so much, and like you looked at it and been like, or did you like put anything new to it? Like, what did it feel good tackling this older material when you had more experience and everything like that?
I will say that Origins came a long way, or my song styles came a long way. This is back just these songs are super old. In my, I became a better songwriter, I think, at creating compositions. Back then everything was just an action movie. Well, kind of like when Origin came out, that everyone knows Origin was just like an action movie, like 30 minutes. But at this point, I was still developing I was definitely into the intensity. So there's some more dynamics probably in some of these songs, because I didn't know that it was actually possible to write music the way that Origin is created through its different eras, back then. So the songs are way shorter, and I just I personally feel that I became a better songwriter and creating composition, and a better guitar player, But it's cool, like it's interesting to go back and like hear these songs, and I had to spend some amount of time trying to figure out, what did I do there on the guitar, and what did the bass player do, and the drums were based off the 3 different drummers I jammed with back in that era of time. So based it off like the best elements of each personal member that I jam with recording this material.
Yeah. What I find unique is because every album I've listened to you guys, it's consistently brutal from start to finish. So is there like a formula or a usual mode you go to in songwriting, or is there a new approach to every song?
Well, the general mentality of everything I've ever pretty much done started. I just wanted to play fast. Who wants to go fast? I want to go fast. You know what I mean? So it was. So I feel like we got to have our signature kind of ferociousness to it. It's always kind of had that. That's kind of the niche to my style of playing, I guess, or the style of music I wrote and or still continue to write. I feel like I try to create a little different element to every album in Origin. Maybe to the casual listener or casual player, they don't really maybe catch it, but it's not for everyone. But it's funny, like now that everything's getting more and more extreme. You know what I mean? Just as that's just kind of, I think Origin has kind of influenced a lot of the sounds that you hear in the modern day death metal, or if you want to even call it death metal. I know what they call it now, but a lot of the techniques that Origin has brought to the table and its history has came to light, and a lot of the newer bands are using, and it's very honorable. Most of them are very appreciative and say, oh yeah, if it wasn't for Origin, our sound wouldn't be like this or whatever. So that's pretty cool. So I just think that Origin has kind of a ferocious kind of sound. It was based off some of the heaviest music ever. We're on tour with Deicide, which was a huge vocal. They were one of the first bands that did the dual vocal approach with the lows and the highs and the combined screaming, and then and then the extremism of the guitar playing and the double bass and blasting or whatever you want to call it nowadays. So
yeah. What I find unique, especially with this record, like I've noticed some songs were most of the songs were very quick too. Like some of them were like a minute and a half, some of them were 2 minutes. I think like the longest song on the record, not the coming into existence part, but part one, I think the longest song was like just a little bit over 3 minutes. So like, how do you know when a song is done, or how do you know when you're like completely satisfied with a track?
Well, these were songs that that era of music, we were never fortunate ever to play shows where we just played garages and then storage sheds and stuff like that. So we were just trying to create a general like oh shit factor. Like nowadays, what's funny is like the last couple albums we kind of added like to the general public probably didn't know that there was a grind influence, which you can kind of hear with the Abiogenesis, and some of the songs are short. Like we do Thrall Fulcrum Apex is like one of those songs that was no one knew anything about these Abiogenesis tracks, but that song's only a minute long. The thing is that I've developed more songwriting and a better, in my opinion, again, the compositional skills and creating more up and down dynamics. And the thing is that I try to create an album that has different twists and turns, a different roller coaster ride per se. I always try to give like with Origin 30 minutes of like close to very 30 minutes of ferociousness and this and that, and then there's probably like in the later years the last 10 minutes or so of the album is trying to create a different dynamic to make it so it still has that Origin sound and feel, but yet to make it be a little bit different than the previous album, and so and some of these like I said, the grind kind of short, fast, quick songs are starting to see show their light of day in the later albums, which is some of now that people have heard a prequel might connect the dot that so this has kind of been a thing that they didn't use on like the earlier Relapse era stuff, but we've used in our more modern day Origin material.
Yeah, interesting. I've noticed that, like, because I feel like Origin does have, like, a grindcore effect to it, a traditional death metal, a technical death metal side, and I think it really says, like, who you've toured with. Like, you're touring with Deicide, death metal, like, legend, but, you've toured with Archspire, which is technical death metal, and then you've done Summer Slaughter with a lot of deathcore bands. Have you noticed maybe, even though these are all very heavy tours, like maybe different types of audiences or different reactions to your music?
No, absolutely. I mean, I do write a lot about like when we start growing more as a band to the audience, like what grabs the audience, you know what I mean? And I think that we try to present a set that, like I said, we would do things where if you just do 30 minutes of an action film and don't have any plot twists or anything, you might lose the more technical guys will be super into it or whatever, but you might lose another portion of that fan base that came to see you, because if they can't grasp onto what you're doing, that's why I try to create these different dynamics to the music, you know what I mean? So trying to grab the person that maybe isn't into all the techie stuff, or like just creating that dynamic where the guy that's like, man, this stuff's way over my head. Like on this tour, there's probably some jungle rock fans like, man, this stuff is terrible. Like, we come out of the gate, we play some crazy stuff, and then we kind of give a different dynamic kind of in the middle of the set where maybe they're like, okay, I can get into this now. You know what I mean? And that's the thing is, like, I'm just trying to create a different mood and like a grouping of songs to grab a listener maybe that isn't into the extremity of what we do, because we do different tours. I mean, generally we are based around the heaviest bands on our tours, whether it be, we tour Christian and Aeon or Belphegor or, Deicide, Suffocation. I mean, we've done so many tours and just playing with so many different bands, you know what I mean? So, we've done black metal tours, we've done metalcore tours, we've done death metal tours. So, yeah, I think playing for these variances of audiences have helped us, or at least helped me understand what I want to present to the crowd.
Very interesting. And I have two more questions for you. One thing I was curious about is because as somebody who has seen you live many times before, like, I think it's a completely different experience seeing you live versus just listening to you on my phone or something like that. When you're playing live, do you try to execute the material exactly how it sounds on the album, or do you like to make the live presence much different experience than people listening to you?
Well, I mean, I as far as like, I'm gonna say 90% of the guitar and stuff is the same, but there is a dynamic that you like. Okay, so we do live in different places, and we write this album, it's kind of gridded out and this and that, but the thing is after hammering it out and playing these shows live, you kind of create this dynamic where maybe, okay, this part's a little faster or this part's a little slower, because I mean, I've tried to stay off the grid per se of recording to a click and everything, but it just makes it easier in the recording sense of how to do an album nowadays. It's more economical and like time efficient, I think. So there's things that I feel like the reason why I think a lot of albums are more stagnant isn't there's this like, okay, it's just always in control, and it's always like this certain pace, and like, I think, I don't know, was it Mario Andretti said, if you're going fast and you're totally in control, you're not going fast enough, you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like we tried to create different dynamics. We learn things through the song by playing them, and I mean, John does some free-for-all stuff. We all find a little niches in there that are like, oh man, I wish I would have done this on the album, or just a little, this little melody or a little different harmony, or it's generally, I'm self-taught, so I don't really know theory or all that stuff, but sometimes I find something that just, I'm like, oh, I think that just adds a little bit more to the song, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it's a little, there's a specific format to the song that we stay pretty close to, and then there's little additions that we add with time, you know what I mean?
Interesting. And the final question I want to ask you is, I know you currently reside in the Bay Area now, but being that Origin originally, you originated, no pun intended, from Kansas, what I'm curious is there a metal scene in Kansas that maybe Origin kind of cut their teeth in, or was it just getting out of Kansas in order to spread the name out there a little bit more?
Well, I mean, there was always a pretty good scene. I actually grew up seeing all the classic bands in Lawrence, Kansas at this place called the Outhouse or the Granada or the Bottleneck, maybe even Wichita on the Rock Island. I used to travel a lot to see shows and all that. So the thing was, is like there was a good scene. Where I grew up at, a lot of like there was a band called Excessive Strain that was the original drummer Origin really influenced. He played in Excessive Strain, and he was the original drummer Origin, really influenced how I composed songs. There was a band called Nosferatu from like Nebraska, which had Nick Miller, who played in Cataclysm on Temple of Knowledge, and he also played on in Anal Blast, Vaginal Vampire. Richard Christie, who played with Death, and Steve Childers, they were in a band called Public Assassin, which they relocated to Florida. They were called Burning Inside. And then Richard Christie went on to be on the final Death album, and has done many things since then. He played in my area as well. So, a lot of those guys were very talented, but didn't get the recognition in the wide, the general, like, the broad spectrum of everything that was out there. I saw Cephalic Carnage, Skeleton of God, all those, and the Colorado scene, and so those bands kind of influenced to me in the way of like the kind of the no coast sound is what I said back then, because everyone was like East Coast slamcore or whatever, and West Coast thrash, and I was like,
probably hear that tonight.
Yeah, so it's like, so it's like we were just like no coast grinders or whatever. I don't know what you would call it, but anyway, it was just kind of like so. At that point, I was looking, like Origin. I resided in Kansas and Colorado for a very small amount of time and came back, and I would travel to go see shows, and I just knew that I wanted to travel more, and luckily Origin soon got signed really quick, and we started touring all the time, and I was basing decisions on like the metal scene and everything. I mean, there was a lot of things that went into it, personal reasons and everything, but I knew that I felt like that even if it was just me that left, that I didn't want to, like the bands that I just mentioned, Nosferatu, early day Cephalic Carnage, early day Skeleton of God, early day Public Assassin, they didn't get the recognition in the broad scheme of the spotlight, so I felt like I needed to advertise myself elsewhere, and I felt like if I transplanted to somewhere else, maybe my name would broaden. Even though I was on a label and everything, I felt like it helped the band. Like I said, I reside in the Bay Area, and there's a really good metal scene there, even though it's basically around thrash in the San Francisco area, the legendary thrash scene. In Oakland, there's a good scene there, and it's as well. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of metal shows, so I was just trying to bring, when we first started playing there at Origin, it was like great shows, and I was like, well, this seems right, this feels right, and like it's a metal area, so I just kind of went with it, and here we are today.
Awesome. Yeah, you ain't in Kansas anymore, Toto.
I am not. I'm glad to be in New York City.
Yep. So before we go, I'd like to thank you so much for your time today. It's going to be a kick-ass show tonight. Is there just anything else with Origin you would like to promote in terms of tours or new music?
We'll see here. We're very excited to be on tour with Deicide, Jungle Rot, and Absence. It's been a great tour. It's coming to the close, and happy to play New York City at the Gramercy. We're playing like a festival in July, Western Canada. I can't think of the name right now. Sorry. And we just announced a South American tour
With Critopsy, right?
With Critopsy. So that's upcoming, and thanks for all the Origin fans for all the years of support, and appreciate all the positive responses to Abiogenesis coming into existence. It's even tough for me. Abiogenesis coming into existence, the prequel, the Origins thing, and so now we can move towards the future and start. Now I can start working on a new album for Origin and stuff. So I don't know anything else besides that. So appreciate the interview and happy to be in the city.
Awesome. We're happy to have you here. Thanks
All right,
so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, Paul of Origin, Abiogenesis are coming into existence. Be sure to pick that up if you haven't already. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We'll see you next time.